Picture a three-wheeled truck, barely bigger than a garden shed, grinding up a mountain road in southern Italy with half a ton of bricks stacked on its back. It should have collapsed decades ago. Today we are counting down 10 trucks so bizarre, so mechanically strange that they looked like they could not survive a single winter. Yet every machine on this list became famous for one thing: refusing to die. Stay with me until the end because the number one spot is a German mutant that looks like a farm tractor swallowed a truck, and it is still being built today. Kicking off our list at number 10 is a stubby American oddball from 1956, the Willys Jeep FC150. The engineers at Willys took the tiny 81-inch chassis of a CJ5 Jeep and did something almost nobody expected. They shoved the entire cab forward, directly on top of the front axle, and dropped a full pickup bed behind it. Under that flat little hood sat the Hurricane four-cylinder engine, pushing out roughly 75 horsepower through a proven four-wheel drive system. Visually, the FC150 is pure cartoon. The cab towers over the front wheels like a phone booth bolted to a skateboard, with a windshield so flat and upright it looks like the truck is permanently surprised. Drivers sat ahead of the front axle, riding the nose of the machine over every bump. It looked like a toy that escaped from a child's sandbox, but that ridiculous layout was a stroke of packaging genius. By moving the cab forward, Willie squeezed a full-size cargo bed onto a wheelbase shorter than most modern compact cars. And because everything underneath was borrowed from the battle-proven Jeep parts bin, the FC150 simply would not quit. Railroads fitted them with rail wheels and ran them well into the 1970s. Fire departments, forestry crews, and utility companies worked them into the ground, and the little trucks kept coming back for more. If a truck that looks like a phone booth surprises you, wait until you see what the French built out of corrugated metal. Number 9 takes us to France in 1947, where Citroën unveiled the H-Van, a machine that looks like a garden shed rolling down the boulevards of Paris. Citroën engineers, inspired by the corrugated aluminum skin of old Junkers aircraft, wrapped the entire body in ribbed steel panels. That corrugation wasn't decoration. It added stiffness to thin, cheap post-war sheet metal, letting the body stay light and strong at the same time. The drivetrain came from the legendary traction Avant sedan, with front-wheel drive pulling the van along at a leisurely pace that rarely troubled 60 miles per hour. The French nicknamed it the pig snout, thanks to that blunt, drooping nose. It is slab-sided, wrinkled, and proportioned like a loaf of bread that somebody stepped on. It looks like it should rattle apart at the first pothole. Instead, Citroën built nearly 500,000 of them over 34 years of production. Because the front wheels did the driving, there was no drive shaft running to the back, which gave the H-Van an ultra-low flat floor that delivery drivers absolutely loved. Butchers, bakers, and police departments across France ran these corrugated boxes into the 1980s with almost nothing breaking. And the ultimate proof is parked on city streets right now. Thousands of surviving H-Vans are still working today as coffee trucks and food trucks across Europe, 3/4 of a century after the first one rolled out. But this next machine makes the H-Van look enormous, because the Italians decided a truck only needed 3 wheels and a scooter engine. At number 8, meet the Piaggio Ape, born in Italy in 1948. This machine came from the mind of Corradino Dascanio, an aeronautical engineer who designed helicopters before creating the Vespa scooter. Post-war Italy was broke, roads were ruined, and small businesses needed to haul goods for pennies. So Dascanio grafted a cargo bed onto the back of a Vespa, gave it 3 wheels, and called it the Ape, the Italian word for bee. Early versions ran a tiny 125 cubic centimeters scooter engine that a lawnmower would laugh at. And the look is unforgettable. A narrow single-seat cab perched over one lonely front wheel, handlebars instead of a steering wheel, and a flatbed hanging off the back. It looks like a scooter that got a job in construction. Fully loaded, it waddles down narrow cobblestone alleys, sounding like an angry sewing machine. Everyone outside Italy dismissed it as a joke. That was a mistake of historic proportions. The Ape could legally squeeze through medieval streets no real truck could enter, sip fuel like a moped, and haul loads that seemed physically impossible for its size. Farmers in Tuscany and street vendors in Mumbai piled them high with produce, gas cylinders, and entire families. Millions have been built, and new apes are still rolling off production lines in India today, more than 75 years after the first one buzzed out of the factory. And if three wheels on a scooter truck sounds strange, the British took the same idea and used it to run their entire railway system. Coming in at number 7 is the Scamell Scarab, a British three-wheeler that first appeared in 1948. Scamell engineers built it for one very specific battlefield, the cramped loading yards and railway depots of late 1940s Britain. Power came from a small, low-stressed engine of around 2 liters, with a Perkins diesel option, driving the rear wheels while a single front wheel handled the steering. The whole tractor unit was engineered to couple automatically to special trailers, letting one driver drop a loaded trailer and hook a fresh one in seconds. Visually, the Scarab is delightfully absurd. A rounded, bulbous little cab sits over one front wheel, giving it the face of a friendly cartoon beetle. It looks less like a truck and more like a fairground ride that wandered into a freight yard. Grown men driving them looked like they were operating carnival bumper cars, but that single front wheel hid a superpower. The Scarab could turn around completely within its own length, spinning between parcel carts and loading platforms in yards where a normal truck would need a three-point turn and a prayer. British railways bought them by the thousands, and they hauled parcels and freight through tight city streets for nearly 20 years of hard daily service. The simple, understressed mechanicals barely ever failed. It was a machine designed by people who understood that boring reliability beats impressive horsepower. Now, from a cartoon beetle to a bug-eyed Swedish soldier that laughs at Number 6 brings us to Sweden in 1974 and the Volvo C303, a military box on stilts that looks permanently startled. Volvo built it for the Swedish Armed Forces, powering it with the B30, a rugged 3-liter inline 6-cylinder engine producing around 117 horsepower. The party trick sits underneath. The C303 uses portal axles, where the wheel hubs hang below the axle centerline through gear reductions, lifting the entire drivetrain high above the ground. The result is roughly 15 inches of ground clearance under a truck that is still compact enough to thread through a forest, and it looks completely unhinged. A tall, flat-sided steel box balances on top of those stilt-like axles, with 2 big round headlights bulging from a flat face like the eyes of a startled frog. It appears top-heavy, awkward, and one stiff breeze away from tipping over. Yet in the frozen swamps and snowfields of northern Scandinavia, this bug-eyed box became a legend. The portal axles let it crawl over rocks and stumps that would tear the guts out of ordinary trucks, and the simple Volvo 6 just kept running through brutal Arctic winters. Swedish soldiers trusted them from the 70s into the new millennium, and surviving C303s are now prized by off-road enthusiasts who regularly humiliate modern 4x4s with 50-year-old military surplus. Quick pause before we hit the top 5, which includes a Czechoslovak monster with 12 cylinders and no radiator. If you love machines that refuse to die, hit that like button and subscribe. Back to the countdown. Number 5 is a machine that millions of Americans over a certain age will recognize instantly, the Divco milk truck. The Detroit Industrial Vehicle Company launched its first delivery trucks in 1926, but the famous snub-nosed design arrived in 1937. And here is the fact that earns Divco its place on this list. That same basic snub-nosed body stayed in production until 1986, nearly 50 years of one design. One of the longest production runs of any truck in American history. Under the stubby hood sat simple Continental 4-cylinder engines, tuned not for speed, but for endless stop-and-go torture. The Divco looks like a truck drawn by a child. A rounded, drooping snout, a tall, boxy body, and big sliding doors on both sides built for a driver hopping down with a wire basket of glass milk bottles. But the strangest part was how you drove it. Milkmen operated the Divco standing up, using a special control system that let them steer, brake, and creep along the curb past porches and doorsteps without ever sitting down, hopping in and out hundreds of times per shift. Think about the abuse for a second. Cold starts before dawn on dark suburban streets, thousands of stops every single day, clutch work that would murder a modern vehicle in months. The Divco shrugged all of it off. Dairies ran the same trucks for 20 and 30 years, and the design outlived the door-to-door milk delivery industry itself. But our next truck traded milk bottles for mountain passes, and it came out of Austria looking like a steel loaf of bread. Number 4 is the Steyrpuch Pinzgauer, unleashed from Graz, Austria in 1971. Steyr engineers designed it as a high-mobility military transport, and they threw away the conventional rulebook completely. Instead of a normal ladder frame, the Pinzgauer is built around a central backbone tube, with the driveline sealed inside the tube and portal axles at each corner. Power came from an air-cooled 2.5-liter engine of just under 90 horsepower, cooled by nothing but a fan and flowing air. Visually, it is a slab-sided steel loaf riding absurdly high on tiny-looking wheels, with a flat vertical windshield and all the aerodynamic grace of a filing cabinet. It came in 4-wheel and 6-wheel versions, and the 6-wheeler looks like somebody kept stretching the loaf and forgot to stop. The Swiss Army, famous for accepting absolutely nothing second-rate, bought thousands. And that tells you everything. With no radiator to leak, no coolant to freeze, and the entire driveline protected inside that backbone tube, there was almost nothing exposed to break. Pinzgauers climbed alpine passes in deep snow, forded rivers, and ran for a generation with maintenance schedules that mostly involved changing the oil. Many served their armies for over 30 years, and surplus examples now sell for serious money to overlanders who trust them in the middle of nowhere. But for true middle-of-nowhere credentials, nothing on Earth compares to the Siberian Brute at number 3. Number 3 roars out of the Soviet Union in 1977, the Ural 432-0. Built in the industrial city of Mias, deep in the Ural Mountains, this 6-wheel drive military truck was engineered around one brutal design requirement. It had to work anywhere in the largest country on Earth, from minus 50 degrees in Siberian winter to plus 50 in Central Asian summer. Power came from big, unstressed diesel engines hauling payloads of roughly 5 to 6 tons across terrain that has no roads at all. Visually, the Ural looks like it drove straight out of a black and white photograph. The rounded hood, the flat windshield, and the massive military tires give it the face of a truck from a completely different era, because it basically is one. The cab design barely changed from the day it launched. Comfort was never on the menu, and that is exactly the point. Soviet engineers deliberately designed the Ural so that a conscript with basic tools could fix it in a frozen field with no workshop for 1,000 kilometers. No delicate electronics, no fragile systems, just heavy steel and simple mechanics. Loggers, oil crews, and armies across Africa, Asia, and the Arctic beat these trucks mercilessly year after year, and the Ural factory is still building them today, nearly 50 years after launch. The Soviet Union itself collapsed. The Ural 432-0 did not. But even this Siberian survivor bows to the 8-wheeled Czechoslovak nightmare coming up next. Number 2 is the Tatra 813 Kolos, a Cold War colossus from Czechoslovakia that first thundered out of the factory in 1967. The name Kolos literally means colossus, and this machine earns it. 8 massive driven wheels, a huge flat-faced military cab, and behind it, an air-cooled Tatra 512 diesel pumping out around 270 horsepower. Read that engine spec again. A 12-cylinder diesel with no radiator and no coolant whatsoever, cooled entirely by fans forcing air across the cylinders. Underneath sits Tatra's signature backbone tube chassis with independently swinging half-axles, a layout almost no other truck maker on the planet dared to copy. On the move, the 813 looks like a piece of the Iron Curtain that grew wheels. All 8 tires claw at the terrain independently, the suspension flexing like a living creature as the flat-faced cab plows forward. It appears hopelessly overcomplicated, exactly the kind of machine that should live in a repair shop. The reality is the complete opposite. With no coolant to freeze in winter or boil in summer, the air-cooled V12 ran happily in conditions that killed conventional engines. That backbone chassis let the 813 haul and tow, staggering loads across shattered terrain, and it became a superstar of European truck trials. Its successor, the Tatra 815, went on to win the grueling Paris-Dakar rally multiple times, proving the whole bizarre formula on the toughest race on Earth. And yet, the king of this entire list is even stranger and even more indestructible. Here it is. Number 1, the undisputed emperor of weird reliability, the Mercedes-Benz Unimog. Born in Germany in 1948, the Unimog started as a design by engineer Albert Friedrich for a machine to rebuild German farming after the war. The name is short for Universal Motor Gerät, meaning universal motorized implement, and universal is exactly what they built. Portal axles at all four corners, equal-sized wheels, power takeoffs at the front and rear to run farm implements, and a frame deliberately engineered to twist and flex like a spine as the wheels climb over obstacles. Your eyes genuinely cannot categorize a Unimog. It sits too tall to be a truck, too fast to be a tractor, with a stubby cab, a tiny bed, and wheels that seem borrowed from something twice its size. It looks like a tractor and a truck had a child that grew up angry. Early critics saw an expensive, confused piece of farm equipment. Then the Unimog spent the next 75 years embarrassing every doubter on the planet. It climbed mountains, plowed snow, fought fires, ran on railway tracks, crossed the Sahara, and won its class at the brutal Paris-Dakar rally in the 1980s. Armies and fire brigades in over 100 countries swear by them, and machines from the 1960s still work farms today. Best of all, Mercedes-Benz never stopped building it. Nearly 80 years after the first one, brand new Unimogs are still rolling out of the factory, the longest running proof in history that weird engineering done right simply refuses to die. So remember that three-wheeled truck grinding up the mountain with half a ton of bricks? The one that should have collapsed decades ago? Every machine on this list looked like a joke. From the corrugated pig snout of Paris to the bug-eyed Swedish box to the eight-wheeled Colossus from Czechoslovakia. And every single one of them outlasted the sleek, sensible machines that were supposed to replace them. The lesson is carved into steel. Simple, overbuilt, and strange beats pretty every single time. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these mechanical oddballs would you actually want parked in your own garage? Did you ever drive one of these beasts? Or maybe ride in a Divco on a summer morning? And which weird, unkillable truck did I miss? Drop it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this ride through the strangest corners of trucking history, hit that like button, subscribe, and click the video on your screen right now for more extreme machines that refuse to die.